If you're an actor, you want to work. Let's just put it down. That makes it easy. If you're an actor, you want to just keep working. So.
It's so fast.
Think you've seen the $6 Million Man at its best? Think again. Hidden beneath the action, the slow-motion leaps. And Steve Austin's bionic strength are moments that slipped past even the sharpest editors. Until now. From strange wardrobe changes to objects that seem to defy logic, these bloopers have been frozen in time, just waiting to be spotted. We've rounded up 10 surprising slip-ups that might change how you see this classic show forever. One in particular will have you questioning whether a certain heroic scene was as flawless as it seemed. Ready to look a little closer? Let's see what you find. The invisible stunt harness. In one of the $6 Million Man's most memorable moments, Steve Austin performs an incredible bionic jump over a tall fence. It's the kind of daring stunt that made the show such a hit in the 1970s. Audiences tuned in week after week to see Steve's superhuman feats, and the crew often pushed the limits of what was possible with the effects of the time. But even bionics had their limits, and so did 1970s stunt technology. If you watch the scene closely, especially now with modern high-definition remasters, you can spot something that wasn't meant to be seen at all. As Steve soars over the fence, the wire harness that helped the stuntman make the jump is clearly visible, catching the sunlight at just the wrong moment. Back in the day, old TVs with curved screens and fuzzier resolution probably hid this mistake. But now, it's as plain as day. A glinting reminder that even TV's greatest hero had a little behind-the-scenes help. This wasn't unusual for the era. Before CGI, shows like The $6 Million Man relied on practical effects, wire rigs, and clever camera angles to create the illusion of superpowers. Stuntmen risked life and limb, and sometimes the wires that kept them safe ended up in the final cut. Producers like Kenneth Johnson emphasized setting limits to keep these powers believable, noting that when you're dealing with the area of fantasy, if you say, well, they're bionic so they can do whatever they want, then it gets out of hand. So you've got to have really, really tight rules. What's fun is imagining how the crew probably hoped no one would notice. And for the most part, back then, no one did. Cutting-edge technology today allows people to love such nice whammies. For them, this is not magic, but a revelation of the skills and hard work brought to bear behind the scenes. It is somewhat delightful to see how much effort went into making Steve Austin look superhuman. Let's be frank, that leap is still quite impressive, even when using a wire harness. This is, rather interestingly, not exclusive to the $6 Million Man when it comes to such a kind of visible stunt rig. Other popular hits, such as Wonder Woman and The Incredible Hulk, had their own similar problems where wires or harnesses were visibly present, while the superhuman feats from the actors were happening on screen. The stunt coordinators then would usually work around hiding their wires by employing crafty camera angles or shadows. But under the glare of bright sunlight, or when using fast camera movement, the hides revealed what was supposed to remain unseen. That makes it a planner. These visible memories give further evidence of the risk of any leap or superpowered stunt as purely as possible through excellent action in human efforts and not digital tricks, rendering these moments even more authentic today. Think that was wild? Wait until you catch what happens next. You won't believe your eyes. Magically, changing boots. In one action-packed episode of The $6 Million Man, Steve Austin is seen sprinting across the desert, chasing down a group of villains with his trademark bionic speed. The dust flies, the music swells, and it's exactly the kind of fast-paced sequence that kept fans tuning in every week. The camera captures Steve from multiple angles as he barrels across the landscape, determined to stop the bad guys in their tracks. But if you look closely, especially in high-definition versions of the show, something odd is happening at Steve's feet that doesn't quite match his high-tech hero image. At the start of the chase, Steve is wearing his familiar brown boots, part of the rugged look that viewers had come to associate with him. But as the pursuit continues and the camera cuts to a different angle, those boots suddenly morph into white sneakers for just a moment. It's a blink, and you'll miss it blooper. But once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Just as quickly as they appeared, the sneakers vanish, replaced again by the brown boots, as if nothing ever happened. The moment stands out because it breaks the illusion of Steve's seamless bionic speed and precision, showing the small human errors that slipped through during filming. Back in the 1970s, this type of continuity error was commonplace in action kind of series. On some occasions, the scenery would be shot over the span of days and then pieced together from several takes, sometimes with the use of stunt doubles. The white sneakers were probably from a stunt performer who worked on the more dangerous or physically extreme of the chase. In the madness of production, it is all too easy to let slip something as tiny as footwear, especially if it was thought of at that time as being inconsequential. Plus, given the smaller screens and lower resolutions of the time, the production would assume that the home audience would not be able to spot the difference. The sighting of this bionic wardrobe change has now become a kind of Easter egg for the die-hard fans who are lucky enough to have the series in high-definition video for viewing. If anything, the charm of nostalgia is added to the viewing experience, subtly allowing audiences to appreciate some of the hurdles involved in producing television in the non-digital era. Bionic heroes were not exempt from the truth of a tight production schedule, extended filming hours, and occasional lapses in concentration. Regardless of the shoes, Steve Austin was always able to outrun the bad guys in style. The extra bad guy. In the episode Act of Piracy, Steve Austin faces off against a gang of criminals who are trying to make a swift and clean escape. The bad guys pile into a speedboat and tear across the water, with Steve racing after them, determined to stop their getaway. The scene is packed with adrenaline. The roar of the boat's engine, the dramatic score, and the quick cuts between Steve and the villains. But for viewers paying close attention, something curious happens that interrupts the high-stakes vibe with an unexpected visual puzzle. At first glance, everything looks right. The camera captures the four bad guys as they jump into the boat and speed away. But then comes the next shot. And suddenly, there's a fifth figure on board. The mysterious extra passenger appears out of nowhere, with no explanation of how he got there. No one climbed aboard between cuts, and there's no way he could have been hiding. The appearance of this uninvited pirate turns the smooth escape scene into an accidental blooper that leaves modern fans scratching their heads. Continuity errors of this kind were almost commonplace in thrillers and chills television of the 1970s. On set, during the shooting of different takes, some small details, like the number of stunt artists, might have slipped the editors' minds. They had been concentrating on making the stunt scenes exciting and uninterrupted, knowing that the audience would be looking at smaller screens that made the visual discrepancies harder to discern. However, in the present day, with sharper remasters available, those quirks are more than visible. It could be that the extra person simply was a stunt double or crew member who walked into an incorrect shot, an inconsequential mistake that turned into a major blooper. Many fans were comfortable with the goof, often heralded as one of its cutest slip-ups. It invokes that racing, almost frenetic energy, with all the very real human input into the production. And though Steve Austin didn't take on the Gang of Five, the bonus bad guy certainly makes for a wonderful rewatch and a great second guessing of whether that other passenger got off the boat or just sailed off into blooper history. The Floating Rock. In one high-stakes episode of The $6 Million Man, Steve Austin faces a classic Bionic challenge. Stop a speeding truck before it gets away. Thinking fast, he hoists a massive boulder, a true showcase of his superhuman strength, and hurls it at the vehicle. Richard Anderson, voicing Oscar Goldman, declares off-camera that they can rebuild Steve Austin. "Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first bionic man. Steve Austin will be that man. Better than he was before. Better, stronger, faster." It's the kind of larger-than-life moment that fueled childhood imaginations and kept fans coming back for more. The scene is packed with energy, slow-motion intensity, and that signature bionic sound, creating an unforgettable action sequence that defines the show's appeal. But if you pause at just the right moment, you'll spot a secret behind the bionic magic. As the giant rock flies through the air, a wire guiding it becomes visible, catching the light for a split second. The practical effect that made the stunt possible accidentally reveals itself, a hidden helper in plain sight. Viewers in the 1970s probably never noticed, thanks to small, lower-resolution TVs. But today, with high-definition remasters, the wire glints just enough to remind us that even bionic strength had a little off-screen support. It was this sort of stuff that bloopered an action-filled series in the greater sense. Before CGI, productions relied mainly on wires, rigging, and carefully choreographed props to pull off superhuman feats. The wire for the rock was probably placed purposely so it would not be seen within the frame, but some tricky lighting, rapid-fire edits, or a camera angle shift rendered it just visible. Other shows suffered through similar obstacles. The hurdles for a super leap were purposely hidden by Wonder Woman or The Incredible Hulk. That was the charm of such high-flying practicals, although not always successfully. Instead of ruining the scene, the floating rock blooper has become a fun Easter egg for fans. It gives viewers insight into the work and creativity at play behind such iconic moments. And honestly, whether by wire or not, seeing Steve Austin take down a truck with a boulder is always gonna be awesome. A true exhibit of 1970s TV heroism at its best. The Bigfoot Reflection. In the legendary The Secret of Bigfoot episode, one of the $6 Million Man's most celebrated two-parters, Steve Austin encounters one of his strangest threats yet. As he battles the towering Bigfoot and uncovers a hidden alien base deep in the wilderness, viewers are treated to a mix of action, mystery, and sci-fi spectacle. One especially eerie moment shows Steve, now captured and unconscious, being wheeled through the alien's lair on a sleek, futuristic metal gurney. The polished surface of the prop added to the otherworldly atmosphere, reflecting the sterile glow of the secret base. But if you freeze the scene at just the right instant, particularly when watching today's high-definition versions, the gurney reflects something not quite from another world. Instead of just eerie lights, sharp-eyed viewers can spot the faint but clear reflections of crew members or camera operators in the shiny metal. What was meant to enhance the alien set design accidentally turned into an unintended behind-the-scenes peek. For a brief second, it almost feels like Bigfoot and his alien allies brought along their own camera crew for the ride. This type of blooper emphasizes the difficulty of shooting practical effects and props that incorporate a reflective surface. In the 1970s, production crews had no kind of digital tool to erase these little slips in post. That being said, they worked with practical lighting, camera placement, and a bit of luck to conceal any reflections and other secrets from the set as best as they could. On smaller curved TV screens back in the day, it was easy for an unsuspecting audience to miss them. Now, in modern remasters in high definition, what used to harmoniously exist in the background is being revealed to the forefront. Similar problems presented themselves in the other shows of the era, wherein reflective props or mirrors occasionally reflected crew members. These reflections, once perceived as a nuisance by audiences, are now a charm of the episode. They serve as a vestige of creativity, craftsmanship, and some flaws that mark the making of distinguished television. The secret of Bigfoot was all thrills, giant footprints, secret technology, and now this crew cameo, adding an extra dose of nostalgia to the show. Those are the little details that make people smile, knowing that sometimes even the most carefully constructed scenes had surprises of their own. Hold on to your seat. This next blooper is in a league of its own. Vanishing Gun. In one action-packed episode of The $6 Million Man, Steve Austin finds himself in serious danger. And for once, his trusted boss, Oscar Goldman, takes matters into his own hands. Known more for his calm command at headquarters than frontline action, Oscar pulls out his gun, ready to defend Steve and take on the bad guys. The tension builds as Oscar steps forward, gun drawn, and for a moment, he looks every bit the unlikely hero. But what happens next turns this dramatic moment into one of the show's most charming continuity slips. If you watch carefully, especially with today's sharper video formats, you'll notice Oscar holsters his gun. And then, a few seconds later, he pulls it out and holsters it all over again, as if stuck in a bionic time loop. What should be one fluid sequence becomes a curious repeat of the same move. Back when the show first aired on 1970s television sets, with small, fuzzy screens, most viewers probably didn't catch it. But modern fans, rewatching in high definition, now spot it instantly, and it never fails to bring a smile. The blooper had more than likely occurred during editing. Action scenes were usually pieced together from various takes, from multiple angles, to create a smooth, gripping flow. And in this frenzy of the cut, the editors probably could not catch that they'd mixed up two versions of the same move. Such continuity errors were quite easily missed on the cutting room floor when the editors were focused on keeping the scene tense and fast-paced. It is a small, harmless mistake, totally the kind that adds a charmingly human touch to classic television. Not only was it missed in the moment, but the double holster gaffe has spread and become a beloved favorite among audiences who eagerly share and reshare their discoveries. It preserves the nostalgic fun as fans compare their memories of the $6 Million Man with how even the most serious production moments had room for mischievous quirks. Really, Oscar Goldman and his gun have never had a more magnificent starring role than in the episode of this repetitive mistake. The Shrinking Stunt Kid. In the dramatic episode Danny's Inferno, Steve Austin comes to the rescue in classic Bionic style. A teenager is trapped in a dangerous situation at a construction site, and Steve has to act fast before disaster strikes. Without hesitation, he scoops the boy onto his back and leaps from a towering structure, showcasing the kind of heroic, slow-motion super jump that made the series such a hit. The moment is filled with tension and energy, a perfect example of the show's blend of action and heart, until, that is, you take a closer look at the jump itself. As Steve soars through the air with the boy clinging to him, something curious happens mid-flight. The teenager seems to shrink in size and stiffen unnaturally, transforming from a living actor into a smaller, rigid stunt dummy. The change is quick but unmistakable once you notice it. The swap was done for safety, of course, but the difference in size and realism between the actor and the prop makes the blooper stand out, especially on today's larger, sharper screens. It's one of those funny details that turns an intense moment into an accidental visual gag. Such charming deception was commonplace on 1970s television, where the practical way was the only option to accomplish daring stunts. Loose and light enough, a dummy provided safety for a potentially disastrous drop, especially from a height. Barring a few slower folks in the audience, the crew must have figured the lightning speed of the action and low resolution of the old TVs would really keep any switch hidden. Interestingly, this type of creative fixing was, in fact, the making of the $6 Million Man, in that it pushed and stretched its own budget weekly, even if there was often a seam showing. Now, fans remember the shrinking Stunt Kid with a fond eye, seeing it as a charming artifact of how television was made pre-digital age. It is a blooper that does not detract from the magic, but instead accentuates the ingenuity with real hands-on work behind every bionic leap and amazing rescue. Missing bionic sound. If there's one thing fans could always count on in the $6 Million Man, it was that unmistakable bionic sound. The rhythmic ch-ch-ch-cue that told you Steve Austin was about to do something incredible. Whether he was sprinting at superhuman speed or leaping over a massive obstacle, that sound became as iconic as the slow-motion footage that went with it. It wasn't just an effect. It was part of Steve's identity, the audio cue that made every stunt feel larger than life. But in The Return of the Bionic Woman, Part 2, something feels off. As Steve prepares for one of his signature super jumps, viewers brace for the familiar audio. The slow motion kicks in, Steve soars through the air, and then silence. The famous bionic noise is missing entirely. Without it, the moment feels strangely empty, as if Steve's mechanical parts decided to sit this one out. The visuals are still impressive, but the absence of that sound makes the action feel incomplete, like watching a fireworks display without the boom. It's the kind of blooper that's easy to overlook on first viewing, but once noticed, it leaves the scene feeling oddly muted. How did this come about? Probably just some fluky editing oops moment, because with so many action scenes and effects and cuts to weave together, one can certainly imagine that the sound effect was inadvertently omitted from this particular shot. Or perhaps late-stage changes to the footage disrupted the layered sound. In the 70s, when small black-and-white TV screens gave fuzzy, tinny sounds, it went quite unnoticed by many viewers, but today's bright and high versions of old films easily show up such noises. Other shows of that time, such as Wonder Woman or The Incredible Hulk, occasionally experienced similar audio bloopers with their most famous sounds missing or mistimed. To modern fans, this missing bionic sound has just become part of the fun nostalgia around re-watching the series. It shows quite how much those little production touches went into making Steve Austin loom so much larger than life. The blooper doesn't detract from the scene, but rather lets the viewer in on behind-the-scenes workings of how the show's magic came together and sometimes fell a bit short. It is also a great reminder, even the most powerful bionic hero can have an off day. The miracle of the extra glove. In one action-packed episode of The $6 Million Man, Steve Austin finds himself in the middle of an intense, close-quarters fight. The villain isn't giving up easily, and Steve has to rely on his bionic strength and quick reflexes to gain the upper hand. The scene is everything fans loved about the show: fast punches, dramatic music, and the thrill of seeing Steve in action. But look a little closer, and you'll catch a curious costume quirk that slipped past the editors but is now impossible to miss. At the start of the scuffle, Steve's hands are bare as he grapples with his opponent. Yet, in the blink of an eye, a glove appears on one hand in a single shot. Then, just as quickly, it vanishes in the next cut, as if it were never there at all. The quick pace of the fight probably kept most 1970s viewers from noticing the sudden wardrobe change. After all, on smaller, fuzzier TV screens, minor details like that were easy to miss. But in modern high-definition reruns, the extra glove stands out as a delightful and amusing blooper that sharp-eyed fans love to point out. Thus, this kind of slip must have happened during the editing of a complicated fight sequence. Action sequences are filmed over several days, if not longer, with different stunt doubles sometimes stepping in for dangerous moves. A safety precaution stunt performer would have been wearing protective gloves, and in the splicing of the footage, the continuity of Steve's wearing bare hands might have been simply shelved. The editors probably thought that the pace of the scene would not allow anyone to catch the discrepancy, and for the most part, they were right at that time. But now, in high definition, those little quirks that used to be hidden are revealed. This miracle glove blooper, far from ruining the scene, has become one of those small details that add charm when rewatched on The $6 Million Man. It serves to remind fans of the human effort, creativity, and occasional chaos that went into making each episode. Even bionic heroes weren't immune to a little wardrobe magic. And glove or not, Steve Austin comes through again and shows that it takes more than a costume slip to stop a hero. Interestingly enough, incidents like the miracle glove form part of a wider tendency in the production of television shows during the 1970s, where tight schedules and very practical stunt work generally resulted in small lapses of continuity between shots. Mismatched costume details, visible stunt pads, and a variety of other slip-ups were found on shows such as The Bionic Woman or Wonder Woman. These discrepancies were the result of quick shooting and the complications of staging and shooting sophisticated action sequences. Ready for more? The next blooper is hiding in plain sight and will blow your mind. The plane that broke the scene. In the rescue of Athena 1, Steve Austin finds himself in one of his most perilous situations. After a crash landing in a desolate area, his bionic systems are pushed to their limits, and hope seems to be slipping away. The tension is thick as Steve and a senator search the empty skies, desperate for a sign of rescue. It's a perfect setup for suspense, the kind of scene that had 1970s audiences holding their breath, wondering how their hero would make it out alive. But in this moment of high drama, a funny little detail sneaks in. As Steve asks if there's any sign of an air rescue, the senator solemnly replies, "No." Yet, if you watch closely, especially on modern high-definition remasters, you'll see a plane quietly cruising through the background sky at that exact moment. It's as if the rescue mission was already in motion, despite what the script says. The plane that shouldn't be there turns this serious scene into an unintentional blooper, adding an unexpected twist to Steve's plight. Mistakes of this nature were not uncommon in the productions of that time. The technology available on the set was limited, and with a small, grainy TV screen at home, details like those of a passing aircraft would generally go unnoticed by the audience as well as the crew. Most likely, the editors viewed the scene on monitors lower than the HD standard and were very much confident that the sky looked authentically empty. Today, however, crisp remastering and larger screens reveal the stray plane, a hidden detail exposed by modern technology. Similar bloopers have been declared in other classical shows, where it has suddenly been easy to discern background elements unnoticed for decades. But now, instead of ruining the scene, this blooper has added to its charm. Such a discovery from the fans edges closer to the reality of making action-packed television without the help of computers we have today. A passing plane becomes an accidental cameo in the shot, adding to the general nostalgia. making it clear that even bionic heroes cannot outrun real-world surprises sneaking into the shot. Interestingly enough, this stray plane also points out how on-location filming created all sorts of problems for television crews of the 1970s. Control was far more difficult outdoors. Sounds ready-made much more difficult to do than soundstage shoots. Aircraft, wildlife, and distant vehicles could accidentally wander into a shot, especially when tight production schedules left little time for reshoots. In fact, the $6 Million Man wasn't alone. These things happened to many other shows, including MASH, where, sometime or another, jet contrails or passing planes blemished the Korean War skies of the 50s. These happenstance points are reminders of the unreliability of shooting on location, where even the best-laid schemes are outperformed by a real-world disruption. If you enjoyed spotting these fun bloopers, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more classic TV moments. Let us know which goof surprised you the most, or if you've spotted one we missed. And be sure to click on the next video showing on your screen to keep the fun going. Thanks for watching.